Looking ahead to 2022, though, we want to know if we're still past the worst of this or if there are more things to come. Joining us right now is Catherine Thompson. She's the CEO of Thompson Research Group. And Catherine, this is the big question. Have we seen the worst of it to this point?
I think the short answer is maybe. Any swarming pep talk that things are going to get meaningfully better in 22 is just unrealistic. There's been a lot of steps to take to ameliorate the situation. And when you and I first talked about this, it was back in March of 21, and we were only at the tip of the iceberg. And at that time, you had port congestions, delays were becoming the norm, freight costs were starting to skyrocket. And then you were starting to see container availability too, which has further exacerbated the situation. So I guess the real question, Becky, is where are we today? What's changed and what's not changed? I guess on that note, what I'd say is COVID's still here. And I think what we've learned from this is it's just going to take time. Along with that, you still have supply chain issues, whether it's cream cheese in Midtown Manhattan or microchips for the auto plants in Tennessee. You're still dealing with that. And then finally, the other bottleneck is just drivers. You're getting products to the ports, but you're still seeing a shortage of drivers. And there's some estimates that you're just to meet demand, you need at least 80,000 additional drivers just to meet demand.
Catherine, part of the problem with this has been that there has been such incredible consumer demand, like we've never seen in any sort of downturn before, any sort of pandemic before. You expect that to continue in 2022?
The jury's still out. In your previous segment, you were talking about some potential headwinds. So one way to solve the supply chain issue is to have a drop in consumer demand. Overall, consumer balance sheets are still strong. But you're still dealing with the headwinds of inflation, and that will continue into 22. I guess the other thing to think about too is as people have been dealing with, have been benefited from government stimulus, that's also going away. So we expect to see still a pretty good consumer going into 22, perhaps not as strong as we saw in 21. Overall, in the grand scheme of things, I think we're okay. Things will get incrementally better, but really realistically, it's going to be the end of 22 before we see any meaningful change in the supply chain, in our opinion.
Catherine, clearly you can't have as big a factor again as the pandemic. That said, how much of a swing factor would be an elevation again in China and U.S. tensions if that materialized, and also the energy crisis in Europe, and particularly the way it's taking up shipping capacity between the U.S. and Europe, sending various ships of LNG over there?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on two factors that would put the consumer in the backseat in terms of demand. For us in the near term, we see COVID and managing through that something that is something that is workable and doable. This is just part of the progression, unfortunately, of this global pandemic. The real wild card, as you said, is really on the political side. And we have issues both in Russia, and we also have issues in Asia. And both of those could create tensions, particularly as a flow of goods move from China to the U.S.